have a question. Meanwhile, the panelists, the presenters, the moderators, if you have any question, please put your question up. So, Ayan, we have a question for you. It's from Richard K. It's a question is that Ayan, how is social deviance defined? Thank you.
Okay. So we'll define it through the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual version 5. So the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, which is also called the DSM, was laid down by the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, and it has a category in it called conduct disorders. And conduct disorders includes all kinds of disorders which are antisocial personality, which so there's an umbrella called anti-personality social disorder, and then under that comes the conduct disorder. And under conduct disorder, animal cruelty is also defined. So basically, if any individual is expressing in itself through a way which is antisocial in a sense, it can be said that it is socially deviant. And when it is said socially deviant, it can also be understood because conduct disorder also includes animal cruelty in it. Then that is how it becomes, I would say, relevant that a person who is antisocial is also abusing animals.
Thank you, Ayan. Dr. Bohanik, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have questions for each of our presenters. First of all, these were amazing presentations, very, very enriching and stimulating. I really appreciated them very much. My first question is for Dr. Rajamani. It's really a fascinating presentation. I liked how you had opened by talking about Anikantavad, Nayavad, Syadvad. And I was wondering, that's really multiple different perspectivism, particularly in modern interpretation of Anikantavad, of finding value in different opinions, even if they're seemingly contradictory. And I was wondering, and how that shapes a Jain understanding of forgiveness. And I was thinking about some Christian sort of exclusivist claims about a divine authority and forgiveness for like only Christians only. And yet they still have a sense of forgiveness there. I was wondering if you thought about sort of contrasting maybe a pluralistic approach to forgiveness versus an exclusivist approach to forgiveness. I'm sure that there's probably both in both traditions. So that's kind of the first part of my question. And then the other part is it was also kind of striking to me thinking about this sort of communal nature of Jain forgiveness rituals, kind of in contrast to like confessions and forgiveness rituals that tend to be a little bit more private in a lot of Christian traditions. And I was wondering if you'd kind of thought about the difference between like what the effect might be uh, between like a more communal sort of approach to forgiveness and one that's a little bit more personal, more confessional, more private, and how that sort of informs the different traditions' understandings of forgiveness. And then I'll just throw a question real quick out there for Ian. Wow, amazing presentation, great statistics, very thought-provoking. And I was wondering if you had thought about how your observations might collectivize. For example, an individual who's more likely to be violent to animals is more likely to be violent to people. But what can we say about a society at large? Can we, have you looked into this? Have you thought about this? If a society is collectively more violent towards animals, more animals slaughtered a year for slaughter or for food, or more animals exploited for entertainment or vivisection or whatever. Do you think that that might have a relationship to the society at large being more violent, like increased instances of militarism, authoritarianism, higher crime rates, and whether the effects that you seem to be talking about a lot individually, whether those kind of collectivize into society? Okay, so those are my two questions and comments for each of our wonderful presenters. Thank you all very much.
Okay, let me just answer the first questions. Anekindavada, for me, the Anekindavada is the many-sided doctrine. And also, it is no single perspective we can capture from the Anekindavada because it's a different one. So when somebody is committing some kind of mistake to you, you cannot see it in one direction. So you have to see it in the multiple angle. Why he did, whether I have committed some mistakes or he committed something like that. That's number one, my thinking. The second one is Nayavada, the doctrine of perspectives. It is a different viewpoints and hold valid insights also. Because sometimes the people will do something, but they may have some kind of idea, different viewpoints and all these things. And also why I put Sayavada also here, because it acknowledges the reality and about reality and always qualified. If I just put every together, that's why I in my statement I put everything together for the forgiveness, create the intellectual space for forgiveness. Because you when somebody is committing the mistake or somebody is doing the harm to us, we have to think in the different angle, 360 angle, either we can just use Anakandavada, Sayavada, Nayavada, and all these things. When we accept all the other things in together, it will hold it a valid different perspectives. From the different valid perspectives, we will just let it go. So we can just we need not do any kind of angry with them, because if we get angry, then that will reflect to us only. So that is the one I just put it everything together. Then forgiveness will become very easier. From the forgiveness, we'll get the compassion. That my second question is confessions, because in Christianity is of confessions. They will go to the church, they will go to the priest, and all these things. The same thing here, pratikramana is there. Pratikramana mostly, if you just go to the elderly people, or maybe in the especially the monk in the morning when they are getting up, first they will say the pratikramana. What kind of mistakes I committed and how I will get the apology, and I am conveying my apology to all the people. That's why very famous quotation is the Michami Dukkadam. So it is combined together. Only one thing is confessions is under pratikramana. Confession is everything I have to get it from the divine grace. From the divine grace, because I have born with the sin, I have to remove the sin by doing the good things, while showing the compassions. But the Jainism, it's not somebody is going to give you, whether it's a Tirthankara or it's a God, nobody will help you. It is your own inner effort. So that is the basic difference between confession and pratikramana.
Thank you, Dr. Rajamani. Ayan?
Yes. So,
And Ayan, also you have another question if you would like to combine when you're replying. So we have a question
okay.
from Miloni Shah. The question is that, Ayan, do you think past trauma, childhood trauma, or past upbringing under different conditions and situation could also lead to such behavioral issues? Do you think psychological evaluation could help better to understand and take preventive measures?
Okay. So, what Professor Kojin asked and what Miss Meloni is asking is an answer, I would say, in simple terms, yes. Reason being, FBI in 2017 started collecting data, particularly of serial offenders and every other person who was co committing violence against humans. And because the state police department or the law enforcement, particularly the district law enforcement agencies, were not able to handle these serial murderers and rapists. So FBI had to intervene. When they intervened, they started also collecting data for animal cruelty, and they were also interviewing all of these people who were already in jail for committing violent crimes. After they started collecting data, they also started to psychologically assess them to understand if they also had some sort of past history of either being abused by someone or having been seen abuse in their family. So there was this study that they were able to do where they find that 71% of the battered women reported that they were also abused, plus the animals that they had in their house were also abused. After this, what FBI did, they categorized every single of every single act of cruelty under this category of crime against society. And then it was when it was labeled, it was then collected under that labeling. So plus when this is something that is different from what I already spoke, but now when I continue the aspect of people abusing animals for reasons like entertainment, for reasons like using them as belt, shoe, hat, shirt, or sweater, or having them to basically elevate the taste bud or the health, can also be called as an abuse. Because when we understand the whole movement of, I would say, feminism, the feminine has always been abused in all of the sense, and so goes for animals as well. If we see what kind of animals that are being abused, we'll primarily see that it is the female animal that is being abused, either for their milk or for any other reason. And because of that, we are able to also bring that kind of violence. I believe it stems from animals, then escalates to women's. It could be otherwise as well, because of the discrimination that we have created, or a wall that we have created in our minds, which has led not to women being liberated from the atrocities that we do. The same goes for the animals as well. So yeah, if I was able to answer what was asked.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Yes, thank you both for your presentations. And Ayan, your presentation and your answer at the end there just provoked another question for me that I know we've discussed before, and I'm curious to hear from you about this, which is that there are studies in the United States, for example, that show the connection between slaughterhouse workers who are kind of in a position where they're almost forced to abuse animals. They're not necessarily there because they want to. They're doing it because they're trying to survive, or they're forced. And there are connections between that activity and what you're calling social deviance in the form of alcoholism and domestic abuse and all of these things, right? That happens, for example, in the United States. The reason I'm asking this question is the people that it sounds like you're describing are particularly abusing particular forms of animals. I'm thinking of like dogs and other animals that are around. And so the question is, how do we look at this study that you've done, this wonderful study, to show these connections, and look at it at a multi-species level? Like, what species are we looking at here? In your study in particular, like, which species are we talking about? Are we talking about the domesticated dogs, cats, and maybe street dogs or something like that in India? Or are we talking about female cows that are being forcefully impregnated and their milk being stolen from them? Which animals are we talking about? Because it seems like there's two different kinds of
Yes.
abuse. One is forced, where you're forced to work with the animals, and the other is where you actually abuse the animal just because you can, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. And I apologize for not, I would say, bringing the focus onto the kind of category of animal that I was targeting. It is the companion animal that has basically shaped the study. But there was a very peculiar incident, not an incident, there was a peculiar observation that I was able to hear from one of the interview which I spoke to. And he was mentioning how, because of the religion and because of how we revere cows, cows have been given this space where, like I mentioned in the study as well, that they have been given this religious connotation, yet they are being abused in a everyday level or activity of life, and how it also correlates with climate change as well. So that's another conversation for some time. But yes, it is, as of now, the study is for community animals, particularly companion animals, which includes dog, cats, cows. Uh, and these were the animals which have been primarily focused in this study, not the animals which are farmed as of now for human consumption, for which is not required. But I do wish to extend this study to that aspect as well, because people who work at slaughterhouse are also abusing people around them. So, yeah.
Ayan, I have a quick question for you. So when you were studying with your mixed method, did you notice any specific difference between that the cruelty towards animal or even misbehavior comes from a specific social class or economical class, or is it that there is no parameter that we need to look at that as a whole?
Okay, so we were able to observe that the more the urban areas, the more the cruelty was, and
Okay.
the rural areas did not either report, or the cruelty did not happen compared to the urban areas. Secondly, we did not included the part of, I would say, the religious background of the person who was committing animal cruelty. If that is being asked, I would say in certain states the population was higher for the Hindu community, and in certain state the population was higher for the Muslim community. So that is the segregation that I was able to observe. But coming back to the I would say the demographic details, the urban areas showed significant and increasing rate of animal crime, plus also crimes against humans compared to rural.
Thank you so much. All right. Do we have any other questions? Dr. Jonathan Dixon?
Yes, I wish it was a question. It's kind of more of a comment, but I wanted to round out a little bit of the discussion that's happening right now. And I don't know if it's something that Ion wants to speak to or anyone else, but I think what Professor Miller and Ion and others are speaking to is there seems to be, right, this relationship you see when there's violence being committed in one area, it moves across often to children too. I think this is an extremely important part of this discussion is actually violence towards children and things like children's liberation and marital, all these other aspects that have to do with it. But one component that I just want to flag, and I'm curious, maybe Ian, what you say is mostly what the work of David Nybert does, who we actually read together. Who David Nybert actually makes the claim that it's not simply that cruelty that happens to animals is bad for humans, but actually the entire history of the domestication and use of animals has led to only more violence among humans, not because of the psychology, but because of actually the use itself. So, like one example that Nybert gives is that in Europe, they say the expansion of the Roman Empire really wouldn't have been possible without the use of large-scale pack animals that could carry supplies and then were essentially what they call meat on the hoof, meaning kind of meat that carries itself with you. And so that empire actually couldn't take place without this mass scale use of animals. So I'm just curious kind of what you maybe think about that. I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think this is a way that really rounds out the discussion. That's not just about the psychology, but also the way in which the very use of animals, even if animals aren't your concern, seem to only exacerbate tensions among humans. Just curious your thoughts.
Yeah. So yes, it can not only be seen through a psychological lens, but also through how humanity has evolved. And since the inception of, I would say, the consciousness in an individual, or can be said on a collective level as well, we have been doing actions which only comes to us as a benefit. And if that benefit is not something helping us to evolve, we tend not to use that benefit. And animals in that case have been used, I would say, exploited for almost all of the things that they were not there to provide for, yet they were abused for all of the reasons. That is, I had something to say. But I believe the conversation can go for a very long time, because there is a lot to discuss. And I believe when the next colloquium happens, I would be able to present something on those lines as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Miller, if we do not have any further question, I would again like to thank Dr. Chaitanya Rajamani and Ayan Siddiqui for their wonderful presentations and contributions. This is what makes our Engage Jain Studies program, charting new paths across academia, Jain studies, compassion studies, and so on. So thank you so much. And I now hand this over to Dr. Miller.